couple interviews with filmmakers and photographers, but recently I did Lucas Mulliken, who's out shooting his documentary about the COVID response in the U.S. And yesterday, documentary photographer Otta Trio, who's been shooting migrants since 2017. And today, Steve Gute is along those lines. Lucas spent a lot of time at Standing Rock. Otta's been with all these people cross paths, and I've crossed paths with them as well. And I've met them in work, doing covering social justice stuff, either in LA or with Otta Trio and Lucas. I met them in Mexico. So Steve Gute's part of that community. He's also part of a filmmaking community. And in Los Angeles, a place where a lot of people say a lot of things, he's actually what he says he is, and is a very refined cinematographer and editor, filmmaker, musician. But this project that we're going to talk to him about, the Confluence documentary, is it's what's going on with him now and what he's been working on for a while. So let's see what's on his mind and what's going on with the Confluence documentary. Hi, Steve. How are you? Good. Thanks for taking a minute and talking. I want to talk to you about Confluence and what you're doing and where the project's at. I know the scope of it is massive. I want to talk about that. But before we do that, can we talk a little bit about the protests in LA, this most recent Black Lives Matter uprising after our global intervention, after the United States
There we go. Now I can hear you. You were just muted there for a second.
full disclosure,
We did.
we made a documentary together. We're looking at the poster on the screen right now. So radicalized.
Well, yeah, just to give you some background, when the protests in LA started this round, I'd been locked down for months and hadn't really been outside too much. And, I was not too happy with the circumstances with economic relief during the pandemic. And I think a lot of people in America got the shaft. And, so when people came out and, started making the voice after George Floyd was murdered, I felt compelled to go out and just help tell that story, seeing as I've been filming with Black Lives Matter for years. And so I went out one of the first days when there was still a curfew in effect, and there were huge numbers back then. It was just massive. And so this was on like probably the second or third day when I went out for the first time, and just the energy was just, yes, exactly, in late May, early June. And so yeah, it was a really magical experience to go back out there and just be with so many like-minded people who were upset about the same things I was. And so that first day there was a curfew that had been implemented at I think it was 6 p.m. that day, and everyone tried to challenge the curfew. And so there were probably a good 1,000 people out in front of City Hall on the West Steps, all just yelling, "Fuck the curfew!" And originally I was going to leave, around like 6, but people weren't going anywhere, and I just decided I'm just going to stay and see how this plays out. And normally, in most of my work filming direct actions and protests, I've noticed that there's usually kind of a little window, before the cops start arresting everybody. And you kind of have a choice to partake in civil disobedience or not. And so if you want to get arrested, it was really your choice. But that was kind of out the window this time. Literally at I think it was about 6:40, just paramilitary style. The cops all rushed in and started snatching people. And luckily, I'd planned an escape route, but even that got a little tricky because I was planning on just hopping the red line and taking off. But they closed the metro, so there was nowhere to go. We were all just boxed in City Hall, and so I narrowly made it out with a few seconds to spare. But one of the biggest reasons I think you don't want to get arrested as a journalist and a filmmaker is that your footage can become evidence for the police, and they can use that against other people that are out on the streets. So luckily, I was able to get out in time. And originally, I was just going to go out for a day or two and just be a part of it, do what I could to help amplify the message. But seeing people out there who were just dedicating their lives to this and were going out every day consistently. Well, that's a good point to bring up. The fact is, as people have been on the streets, protesting and talking about these issues for literally a decade. And so when Occupy happened in 2011, I felt really compelled to be a part of it because, like I said, it was just, it was a moment where you didn't feel alone. You recognized that there were other people that actually gave a shit about the same things that I did. And I realized that, income inequality and a lot of these other hot button issues were actually finally floating to the surface. And so there was a great community that was created within the response to just that greed and everything that was wrong in the system. And so what happened with Occupy, I think, was a real precursor to what we're seeing now. Everything that happened with the raid and the police brutality really crushing the movement. It kind of prepared everyone for what was around the corner. But like what we saw with the Occupy camp was afterwards, a lot of the people that had things to lose or were more kind of comfortable, they stopped coming out, and it became a more dedicated contingent of people that were constantly in the streets. And without the larger numbers, it means that those people get brutalized even more, and there's less protection when you have less people out there. And so to follow around all of the collective members from Radicalized for several years was a really heartbreaking experience, honestly, because I saw people who were very much motivated to dedicate their lives to imagining a better world, and a lot of their hope and enthusiasm was squashed in that process. But people kept going, and while the numbers have been down, there has still been organizing that's happened in LA. And from the death of the Occupy movement, or whatever you want to call it, the Black Lives Matter movement was born out of that in a lot of ways. And they're different movements, 100%. And Oh yeah, and that's what everyone at Occupy said was just this was a continuation of all the struggles that had come before, and so that's a big thing that I think is really important for people to remember in the activist community, especially in an egotistical place like Los Angeles. Is it's not about you, it's about the movement, it's about these issues, and like I was saying before, though, Black Lives Matter. It wasn't necessarily a continuation of Occupy. They're different movements with different principles and different leadership, but a lot of the principles and a lot of the people in that matrix, gravitated to Black Lives Matter afterwards, and so it was just natural to be on the streets and help them and try and get their message out more. And what happened in 2016 with Decolonize City Hall with Melina Abdullah and Jasmine. Jasmine Abdullah. I apologize, but it really was something that was beautiful, and it reminded me of what happened with Occupy, and so I wanted to be out there. And they were there for how many days was it, Sam?
I think it was 56 days, and the reason that it was deemed a success was because, unlike Occupy didn't leave under their own terms, obviously. We did. Yeah. We got evicted. Decolonize LA City Hall left on their own terms. And shortly after, Charlie Beck, the police chief, took an early retirement. And we're looking at Art Walk right now, the Art Walk riot. And just, the extreme insanity and, the Los Angeles Police Department, I don't even want to get into a rant. They've been under 2 10-year consent decrees. The Los Angeles law enforcement is, even the people in it who are at the top of the pyramid don't deny it. They don't deny the reality of like the corruption and racism and violence. And everybody knows our last sheriff and his undersheriff are in prison, and 22 of the sheriffs. It's like, that's LA. That's just part of it. And police reform, none of it's going to happen until they're forced to do it. We already know.
And even if it is, it's some kind of phony symbolic gesture just to make people go back to sleep. They
did that. They did a new committee with that. I think she's a lieutenant. She's married to Phil Tingarides, who's like a very weird white cop who has a high profile, and he's a friend to the community and all that stuff. And his wife is black, and that's her, and she's the head of it. And it's still a closed system. It's still the Los Angeles Police Department. There's no, real power from any stakeholders, the community, nothing. But I want to switch these videos. By the way, right now we're looking at that kid who got shot with like 4 rubber bullets in Radicalized. Remember when he's pulling up his shirt and he's
really?
like, yeah, not that guy, the other guy.
Okay. He was just trying to get to Rite Aid, man.
He's trying to get to Rite Aid. And so in this...
He didn't even know there was a protest going on. And I meet people like that. I met a guy who was a nurse who just got off a shift, helping people with COVID. And he was just trying to get tacos. And this was like the first or second day I went out. And he ended up getting pelted with rubber bullets, multiple times, just trying to go to get some tacos after work. And that made him an activist. So it's kind of funny that you hear that story over and over. And when people are caught in the crossfire unintentionally, it turns them into activists in many situations.
They get radicalized. And I know on the 25th when I was live streaming at City Hall, I got shot in the ankle with a rubber bullet. It wasn't even a rubber bullet. It was a less lethal projectile. I don't know what it was. But my ankle's still messed up. The lawyers...
That was a really intense day. I still don't know.
Oh, yeah, you shot that day.
As well as I did. Yeah, I was there right in the front. And, I knew some of the people that were organizing the Portland Solidarity March. And so I was invited to come and film. And I didn't know what necessarily was going to happen. They just said, come on out, bring your camera. You're welcome to join us. And, we were doing the march and then eventually came up on the courthouse. And that's when things got really crazy. Some people, small contingent of Black Bloc, were throwing rocks and water bottles and whatnot and broke
pink
windows.
Smoke. They had smoke bombs.
Yeah, but then shit really got real when, the U.S. Marshals and LAPD came out, guns blazing, and I even recognized the commander from our time filming Radicalized. And when I saw him come out, I went, Yeah,
I know who you're
perfect.
talking about. The guy with the salt and pepper mustache. He's like
Exactly. He's
he's
all
like
around.
he seems like a quarterback. That dude
Yeah,
is great. Yeah, that guy's a PTSD like disaster.
but I
Anyways,
was in a pretty good spot when that all went down in front of the courthouse. I was able to hide behind a little wall, put my camera on top, and hope I didn't get shot in the hand. And at one point, a rubber bullet just flew right past my head, and that's when I said, I better put on a helmet finally. And then I
yeah.
put on the helmet, and then when you do that, unfortunately, the cops then assume that you're part of the black bloc, and then they come after you. And so I was grabbed by this one guy, Officer Mott, and he told me to leave. I asked him which way to go, and then he started jabbing me in the ribs with a baton and hit me a couple
Oh,
times and started pushing me into the area where the rubber bullets over where you were. And so, yeah, it ended up being kind of a crazy day. And I lost my shit on the cops in my live stream. And I usually try and, keep it pretty mellow and just be a fly on the wall in a lot of cases and not try and escalate things. But that's a little different. And so, yeah, there's hours of me on the internet definitely losing my cool. But,
it happens.
I stood by
It
what I
happens.
said.
But yeah,
It
it
was
happens.
unacceptable how we were treated out there. I
It
mean,
was
even to see the
unacceptable.
mainstream media, that never.
Hmm. I think you're freezing up. So listen, on the screen, what we're seeing right now is you and
All right, yeah, freezing a little bit. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can. All right, so yeah, that was We'll shift gears and we'll talk about Confluence. Yeah, so Confluence basically has been a 6-year investigation into America's watershed and the downstream consequences of, everything pertaining to our society, literally dams, agriculture practices, energy, fracking, radioactive waste. And so originally it was going to be a documentary that was just covering the Missouri River. And so I followed a team of 3 people that paddled the entire river and traveled 3,000 plus miles and took water samples once every 5 miles on the river to test for excess phosphates, nitrates, and other pollution like heavy metals that accumulate down the river. And so, the project originally was going to be a feature film, but then we went down to the Gulf of Mexico, started covering all of the issues pertaining to dead zones in the Gulf and excessive hurricanes and the oil and gas mafioso matrix out there. And then the drought was simultaneously happening in California and fracking was occurring everywhere. And pretty soon I found myself just bouncing around all over the road, really just, just intertwining myself with frontline communities. And when I was at a protest in front of Energy Transfer Partners corporate headquarters in Dallas, this would have been July or August of 2016, I met some really amazing Lakota and Sioux tribal members that had come from North Dakota. And I told them about the project I'd been working on and how I'd been filming the Missouri River for years. And they invited me to come to the Ocheti camp and to be a part of it and help tell the story because there wasn't a lot of media they could trust at the time. And I don't know if people remember, but there was actually a full-on corporate media blackout that was occurring, and so you didn't see any coverage of Standing Rock until the dog attacks and Amy Goodman and that all really came out. And that's about the time when I got to the camp. So I rolled in a very tense moment, and I was there, for some of the really extreme confrontations with Mandan County sheriffs, the military and God knows whatever private security goons were out there. So Tiger Swan and these other Blackwater type military contractors were operating, and you didn't know who was even shooting at you sometimes. So the day you're referring to was November 3rd, 2016, and there was construction going on the other side of the Cannonball River on top of the hill, which everyone referred to as Turtle Island, and people they people were praying in the river, and it was just started unloading on everything. It was a crazy day to be there. The nonviolent, peaceful. They're not protesters. They were water protectors. Just to see how they were brutalized for praying on their own tribal land. To protest a project that shouldn't have even gone through there in the first place was pretty ridiculous. And so, yeah, that was one of the more intense days during the whole period I was there. But that day also really did change the conversation. And I'll never forget on November 4th, waking up, and this is the day after, there was a line that went on for, probably like, a quarter mile of journalists trying to check in, to the media tent. And it was clear that at that moment, the silence was over and the whole world was watching. But with that attention also came provocateurs, and then even people that were just coming to the camp and bringing in a lot of negativity and ego. But the community that was created there at Standing Rock, that was probably the most beautiful place I've ever been a part of. And a lot of people told me this, that the camp there, that was the first time a lot of people really felt a sensation of being home. And I always take that wherever I go.
I want to talk to you about the future. Let's end with this. Tell me about the future with Confluence. What's the plan, and what's your what have you been doing?
While the pipeline was built and the camp was broken up, the sacred fire that was lit there really carries on. And yeah. Well, I'd say all bets are off right now in terms of the election. And, I cover a lot of elections, and I've never seen anything like this. But this past primary process was particularly, disgusting to me. And, I think the election's realistically a farce. Trump is obviously an authoritarian asshole, and yes, I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to encourage you not to put your faith into corporate. Yeah, can you hear me? Your signal's a little bad. I don't know if you can see it. I think I'm asking questions and you're not hearing it. Yeah, can you hear me? My question is this. What's the plan? What are you up to? And what's going on with Confluence?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, Oh, you can? Great. There's a huge delay because I asked you that question a minute ago.
Yeah, I can. Okay, so Confluence, basically, we have been filming. All right, yeah, there seems like there's something wacky going on connection-wise here. So, I don't know, you want to keep going or you want to try this another time?